What do you do when the woman you are about to marry calls you a wrinkled prune in front of your friends, your future in-laws, and your own mother? How far can she push public humiliation, blame everything on your sensitivity, and still expect you to stand at the altar with a smile? This outline follows how I stayed calm, recorded what really happened, and finally used only lawful steps to answer a joke that cut deeper than she ever expected. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Jasper Marlowe, and if you had asked me a month before the wedding whether I felt lucky, I would have said yes without thinking. Back then, it still looked like a simple story. Steady man, lively woman, a small ceremony with friends and family, a little girl in a dress holding flowers. The first cracks did not show up during a fight or a confession. They slid in quietly through jokes about my face while I was standing in our own kitchen, holding a pen and a roll of tape. I was trying to fix the cuff of my rehearsal shirt when Camilla told me she needed to test how I would look under the lights. She moved me closer to the overhead bulb, narrowed her eyes, and announced that the camera would be cruel to my forehead if we did not do something creative. She said that good lighting was important when someone already had a wrinkled base to work with. She described my skin as a pre-wrinkled canvas, and laughed like she was workshopping material, not talking about the man she planned to stand beside. I tried to answer in a calm, light way, telling her that I was not that old and that most of my day was spent under warehouse bulbs, not ring lights. She brushed it away and said that her followers loved when she was brutally honest, and that a husband who could not take a joke would not fit her brand. After she left the room to look for a different pair of earrings, I sat down at the dining table and turned my laptop toward me. The budget sheet for the wedding and rehearsal was already open. I had been tracking deposits, food costs, travel for my parents, and small extras that somehow grew every week. Rows of numbers and short notes lined the screen. Rehearsal dinner, gifts, decorations, rental suits, makeup trial. I added a few more lines for new purchases Camilla wanted, then checked the total. It was climbing, but still manageable if nothing unexpected happened. As I typed, a small message appeared in the corner of the screen. The symbol for our cloud storage. A neat sentence, file uploaded successfully. The folder name was simple, just Archive A. To anyone else, it would mean nothing. To me, it meant the sheet was saved and safe, one small piece of order in a life that was starting to feel less controlled. On the fridge behind me, our wall calendar leaned slightly crooked on its hook. The square for the rehearsal weekend had a small note in my handwriting. Lena and Noah, Rehearsal Community Center. Under it, I had drawn a tiny rectangle to remind myself when my parents would arrive. When I went to adjust the calendar, I noticed how thick the binder under it had become. The label on the spine said Household in my uneven block letters. I slid it out, feeling the added weight. Inside, there were old bills, rent receipts, insurance notes, and a few simple agreements from years past about how we would split basic expenses when Camilla first moved in. Those pages had seemed almost romantic at the time, two people planning to build something together. Now they looked more like a record of who had carried what. I added a small sticky note on the inside of the cover and wrote two plain words, Rehearsal Weekend. Then I closed the binder and pushed it back into place. While I was still at the table, my phone buzzed and flashed across the wood. It was my mother, Helena. I put the call on speaker and tried to keep my tone light as we talked. She asked how preparations were going, whether Mira had tried on her dress, whether I was sleeping enough. I told her that everything was on schedule, that the lighting plan at the community center was under control, and that Mira was excited about walking down the aisle as a little helper. Helena sounded happy, but I could hear a line of worry underneath. She said she knew Camilla loved jokes, but she reminded me that constant jokes about a partner's looks could slowly carve grooves in a relationship. She said that once someone got used to laughing at you, it could become the only way they knew how to speak in public. I told her not to worry, that Camilla just liked to perform, and that it was part of her work. Camilla came into the kitchen near the end of that call, already dressed in leggings and a loose shirt, hair up in a messy knot. She listened to the last few sentences and later told me that my mother needed to relax, that older women did not understand how social media worked. She suggested that if I kept letting Helena soften me, I would end up unable to handle even the mildest teasing. I did not answer. I cleaned up the table and helped Mira finish a drawing she had started. 3 stick figures in front of a big building with a door and tiny triangles for flags. She told me it was us at the wedding, that I was holding hands with Camilla and with her. In her drawing, my face had the biggest smile. She said she made it extra big to balance my serious face in real life, because she had heard Camilla say I looked too serious in photos. That night, after we put Mira to bed and the apartment grew quiet, Camilla sat in the master bedroom, scrolling through rehearsal speech ideas on her phone. I lay on my side of the bed, looking at the ceiling. She read lines aloud without naming me directly, testing the rhythm of jokes about men who age faster than women and about brides marrying their first pensioner. She laughed each time and told me her audience would love it. I told her that I hoped she would not forget that there were people in the room who were not her followers. People like my parents and our child. She said if they loved me, they would learn to love her humor too. When she finally went to the bathroom to remove her makeup, I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up my hand and a small preview slid along the top. It came from a thread I had labeled follow-up, a neutral name for something that did not feel neutral at all. The message said they could answer questions about pre-marriage options whenever I was ready, and reminded me that information was not the same as action. I stared at it for a moment, feeling my throat tighten. Then, hearing Camilla's footsteps on the hallway floor, I swiped the preview away before the chat fully opened and set the phone face down again. I turned off the lamp on my side, letting the room fall into darkness, and lay there listening to the sound of water in the bathroom sink, wondering when exactly I started hiding simple reminders from the woman who was about to become my wife. The next morning at work, the office felt louder than usual, even though the number of people had not changed. I walked through the rows of desks in the open-plan floor of the lighting company, carrying my lunch in a small bag. The smell of coffee, printer toner, and plastic binders blended into something familiar. I sat down, woke up my computer, and went to check the schedule for upcoming events. Before I could even open my email, one of my colleagues rolled his chair over with his phone already in his hand. He told me that Camilla had posted something funny about me, and asked if I had seen it. On the screen, I saw a selfie of her in soft rehearsal makeup, smiling perfectly. The caption read that she was practicing her speech for her future wrinkled husband, followed by a string of laughing faces and a tag to my account. There were comments from mutual friends, some from people who knew me only as Jasper from the lighting company, saying that she was savage and hilarious. I swallowed the first answer that came to mind and chose a different one. I told my colleague that Camilla loved strong humor and that it was just her way of being dramatic before the wedding. I even forced a small smile. Inside, though, I felt a slow heat building in my chest. After he rolled away, still chuckling, I noticed two more coworkers glancing at me and quickly back at their screens. Not long after, my manager, Martin, stopped by my desk. He rested his hand on the edge of it and said in a quiet tone that he had seen the post. He did not tell me what to do. He simply reminded me that some of our clients followed personal accounts, and that jokes about someone being half retired before the wedding could make people think things that were not true. He said he trusted my judgment, but he asked me to keep in mind how quickly stories spread when people worked in events and media. I thanked him and said I understood. When I was alone again, I opened a small personal spreadsheet, not connected to any company system. At the top, I typed the date. In the first empty line, I wrote a short description in plain words. Camilla's post calling me future wrinkled husband, tagged with my name, comments from coworkers and clients. I kept it factual, without adjectives. Then I saved the file into a folder in my personal drive named Archive A. A tiny message popped up on the corner of the screen again. File uploaded successfully. It looked insignificant, but my shoulders eased a little. It felt like I had taken one thing that was floating out of my control and pinned it down. During my lunch break, the office noise dropped to a low murmur. I went to the small break room with my headphones. My phone showed a missed call from earlier labeled private. It was the same number I had used when I first reached out weeks ago, asking general questions about rights and protections before a marriage. I called back, placed the headphones over my ears, and listened as the voice on the other end asked if I still wanted to schedule a time. I told them, in a low voice, that I was not sure yet, that I did not want to act in anger, but that I needed to understand what would happen if things did not improve. They explained that they could talk about pre-marriage agreements and about how to protect a child's stability if a relationship changed later. They repeated that information did not force me to do anything. I said I would think about it and ended the call. A faint beep from the recording app marked the end of the audio log on my phone. After work, Camilla suggested that we take Mira to the supermarket to pick up a few more items for the rehearsal dinner and the after party. She said she wanted everything to be perfect and that we needed more cute details for her content. The supermarket's fluorescent lights washed us in flat color as we walked the aisles. At first, it was normal. Basic groceries, bread, milk, fruit. Then the cart started to fill with other things. Special napkins she said would look good in photos, more expensive wine than we had planned, small candles, extra bottles of skin serum, and under-eye patches for her pre-wedding routine. When I reminded her, in a quiet and careful way, that we had already gone over the budget and that these extra things would push us past it, she reacted loudly. She told Mira, in a half-joking voice that carried easily to nearby shoppers, that Daddy worried so much about numbers because he was already aging twice as fast as everyone else. She said that people with wrinkled energy always tried to control fun. She added that she was just collecting material for her rehearsal speech and that her wrinkled prune line would kill in the room. A woman near us looked away quickly, face stiff with discomfort, but said nothing. I stayed calm. I told Camilla that I did not mind being the careful one, but that I did mind being turned into a public punchline. She rolled her eyes and said I sounded just like my mother. When we reached the checkout, the belt filled with items and the total climbed. Camilla took a call from one of her friends in the bridal party and stepped aside, laughing about how her fiancé was probably taking screenshots of receipts. In the end, I handed my card to the cashier and paid the full amount. As the long receipt printed, I picked it up, laid it flat on the counter, and took a quick photo with my phone before folding it and sliding it into my wallet. On the way out of the store, Mira held my hand and walked quietly for a while. Then she asked if it was true that I looked like a prune and if that was bad. She said she had heard Camilla say that word more than once and did not understand why it was funny. I told her, as calmly as I could, that people sometimes used harsh words to get attention, and that getting older did not make anyone less worthy of love. I told her I would always be her father, no matter how many wrinkles I had. She nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, and pressed closer to my side. As we crossed the parking lot to our car, Camilla's phone chimed with several quick notifications. She checked the screen and laughed. Someone from the bridal party had shared a screenshot of her future wrinkled husband post in their group chat, adding a message that she absolutely had to use the wrinkled prune line into the microphone at the rehearsal because it would slap in front of everyone. Camilla showed me the screen for a moment, amused, then typed back that she was not sure if I was ready for that level of honesty, but that she might do it anyway. She walked ahead toward the car, still smiling at the chat, while I stood for a second between rows of parked vehicles holding the grocery bags. The glow from her phone reflected off the metal around us. In that small pause, with the group chat pinging and her fingers flying, I understood that this joke had grown legs and an audience, and that whatever happened next at the rehearsal would not stay in the room. The day of the rehearsal felt like a dress rehearsal for our whole future, not just for a ceremony. I woke early, ironed my shirt in the kitchen, and tried to focus on small tasks that I could control. The hiss of steam from the iron was steady, like a breath I could not take on my own. Omira sat at the table in her school clothes, swinging her legs and asking if she would get to practice walking down the aisle too. I told her she would, that she would carry a small basket, and everyone would think she looked like a fairy. She smiled and said she wanted me to look like a prince, not like someone on a fruit stall. I knew she had heard that phrase from somewhere that was not her own mind, and the thought left a sour taste in my mouth. In the bedroom, Camilla moved between the wardrobe and the mirror, trying different dresses for the rehearsal dinner and the rooftop drinks afterward. She stepped into the kitchen at one point in a fitted dress and asked if the color made her look like the main character. I told her she already looked like the main character everywhere she went. She laughed and said that every leading lady needed a funny sidekick and that I was perfect for that role. She added that the lights at the community center would not do my face any favors, but she had decided to marry me anyway. She called it a noble act, as if she were rescuing me from a lonely old age. When we reached the community center, the hall was half decorated. Rows of chairs stood in neat lines, and small strings of lights were draped along the walls. My company had done some of the rigging, so I noticed every cable and fixture, not just the flowers. Lena and Noah greeted us with tired smiles. They had spent the morning signing paperwork and answering last-minute questions from relatives. The rehearsal coordinator clapped her hands and asked everyone in the wedding party to line up and walk through the order of the ceremony. I took my place near the back beside Camilla, while Mira watched from one of the chairs with my parents. We walked the aisle a few times, stopped where we were told, and practiced turning. The sound system was next. The coordinator handed Camilla a microphone to test it for speeches. She said they needed to check levels, not content, but Camilla saw it as a chance to perform. She addressed the empty chairs and a small cluster of people like it was already full of guests. At first, she kept it mild, saying she was happy to be here, that Lena and Noah were perfect together, that love was beautiful. People nodded and smiled. Then she shifted. She said she wanted to thank Lena for letting her bring her own little project to the party, meaning me. She said that some brides had to push their partners into commitment, but she had gone the other way and chosen someone who already looked like a future grandfather, so she did not have to worry about him going anywhere. The joke got a few nervous laughs. She saw that and doubled down. She added that from some angles I already looked like a wrinkled prune, but that she had decided to be kind and overlook it. This time, the laughter was louder. I watched people look back and forth between her and me, not sure where to land. I heard my mother's breath catch beside Mira. Helena tried to keep her expression neutral, but the corners of her mouth fell. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I stood there, hands folded, listening to my future wife talk about my face into a microphone that echoed around the hall where we would say our vows. I did not interrupt. I did not ask for the microphone back. I focused on my breathing and on Mira's small figure in the middle row, swinging her legs without understanding why the adults were laughing. When Camilla finished, she handed the microphone back to the coordinator and asked if the sound had been clear. The coordinator, caught between professionalism and discomfort, said it had been very clear. I thought the same thing. It had been too clear. During a short break, while people moved chairs and talked in low groups, I walked over to a small folding table near the side wall where the rehearsal notes lay. On top, there was a clipboard with papers labeled Statement for the Ceremony. I picked it up and looked at the page. Under the printed order of events, there was a space with lines for notes. I took the pen attached to the board and wrote the date and a short sentence. Rehearsal. Camilla calls me Wrinkled Prune into mic. Laughter from group. Mother present. My handwriting looked stiff and careful. I did not add any adjectives. I slid that page back under the others, clipped it, and placed the board exactly where it had been. Later, when rehearsal ended, we moved upstairs to the rooftop bar that Lena and Noah had reserved for drinks. The evening air was cooler, and the city spread out around us in silent lights. Music played from speakers near the bar, not too loud, but enough to cover parts of conversations. People loosened their ties, took off jackets, and let their shoulders drop. Camilla seemed energized by the whole event. She stood near the edge of the crowd with Rafe, the best man, telling him how she had tested material during the sound check. He laughed and said the prune line was brutal but epic, and that she should definitely do it again during the real ceremony. He flexed his arm when someone pointed a phone at them, and she leaned into his side like they were on a show. I stayed near a railing, holding a club soda. I could hear only parts of their conversation, but every now and then I caught my name and the words old, wrinkled, lucky. A few of the bridesmaids came over to tell me that I had to admit the joke was funny, that this was just how Camilla showed love. I told them I preferred respect to roast, but I kept my voice soft and polite. One of them filmed Camilla giving a mock toast where she lifted her glass and said that when life gives you prunes, you make them sign the marriage license before they dry out completely. People around that corner laughed, and a flash went off. At one point, I glanced at my phone to check the time. A small notification slid across the top. Meeting. Personal. 9:30 a.m. 2 days from now. It was a calendar entry I had made before, a reminder that I might need to talk to someone neutral about protecting my daughter and my finances. I tapped it away when a group moved past me, not wanting anyone to see the words on the screen. When I looked back up, I saw Rafe and Camilla posing for a selfie on his phone, her hand on his shoulder, his other arm around her waist. My face was not in that frame, but my name lived in the captions they were already planning. Later in the evening, as the sky shifted from blue to deep gray, someone in the group shouted for one more speech. They pointed at Camilla and Rafe, saying that the funny duo needed to bless the night. Camilla laughed and said she would save the good lines for the real thing. At that moment, her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down and smiled wider. I saw, over the top of her screen, a notification from the bridal group chat with a small thumbnail of the rehearsal hall. Someone had already posted a video of her wrinkled prune line, complete with laughing emojis, and the caption that this was the best rehearsal speech ever. My stomach dropped a little as I realized that what happened in that empty hall was now free to travel anywhere. That night, when we finally went home, Mira fell asleep in the back seat of the car. I carried her up the stairs while Camilla scrolled through her notifications, laughing quietly to herself. Once Mira was in bed, I stood in the doorway of the dark room and watched her breathe. My phone lit up in my pocket with a soft buzz. When I checked it later, alone in the living room, I saw a message preview from the follow-up thread. It asked if I wanted to schedule a time before the wedding date, just to discuss options. I did not open it, but I also did not delete it. I let it sit there, glowing faintly in my mind long after the screen went dark. The next day, the rehearsal dinner took place at a family restaurant not far from the community center. They had pushed several tables together to form a long one, set with plates, glasses, and simple decorations. Lena and Noah sat at the center, looking tired but relieved that the rehearsal was over. Camilla arrived beside me in a dress she had chosen specifically for photos, her hair styled in loose waves. She whispered that tonight would be about fun and that I should be ready for more jokes. I felt my shoulders tense, but I did not argue. As soon as the appetizers arrived, conversation split into pockets. Lena's parents talked about guest lists and seating plans. My parents spoke quietly with Mira, who sat between them and practiced folding napkins into shapes. Vivian, Camilla's mother, seemed to be waiting for her moment. She finally took it when someone asked how the rehearsal had gone. She sat up straighter, banged her fork lightly on her glass for attention, and retold the Wrinkled Prune moment in great detail, copying Camilla's tone and hand gestures. She said the whole hall had roared with laughter and that it would be the speech of the year. People at the table looked at me while she spoke, some laughing, some looking uncomfortable. When she finished, she said that Camilla was brave enough to tell the truth and that too many women settled for average men without at least trying to have fun with it. I felt heat rise to my face, but I kept my voice even. I said that being the subject of a joke in front of friends was one thing, but being described as a wrinkled prune into a microphone, with my mother and daughter present, had felt more like humiliation than humor. I said that I did not think respect and fun were enemies. Vivian waved her hand and said I was being dramatic, that I should be proud her beautiful daughter was still willing to marry someone who already looked halfway to retirement. She added that a man who could not laugh at himself would not last long in their family. Camilla leaned back in her chair, sipping her drink, and said I was once again trying to script her, to control what she said and how she presented herself. She said that her followers expected honesty, and that if I wanted a quiet, careful woman, I should have chosen someone else from the start. Under the table, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out enough to glance at the screen. A preview from the follow-up thread appeared. They wrote that they understood things might be tense before a wedding and that pre-marriage agreements or clear plans around children were often better discussed calmly before any signing. I locked the screen before anyone could read over my shoulder and slid the phone back into my pocket. Later that evening, after the dinner, I took Mira to the park playground near our apartment while Camilla went ahead to meet some friends for a late drink. The sky was soft blue and a few children played nearby. Mira climbed, slid, and swung for a while, quiet in a way she usually was not. Eventually, she came to sit beside me on the bench with her small sketchbook. She drew 3 figures again, but this time, instead of a big smiling face for me, she drew a small oval and then rubbed it out with her eraser. She replaced it with a question mark above a body shaped like mine. She looked down at the drawing and asked if people stopped loving you when you looked older. She said she had heard Camilla say that people liked smooth faces more and that nobody wanted to marry a prune. She asked if I was going to look older and older until nobody wanted me. I felt something twist inside my chest. I told her, slowly, that faces changed with time, but hearts did not have to. I said that her grandmother had lines on her face and was still one of the most loved people I knew. I said I would always be her father, no matter how many lines I had, and that anyone who truly loved her or me would not make our worth depend on smooth skin. She nodded, but her eyes stayed uncertain. While she went back to the slide, my phone rang. It was my mother. When I answered, she sounded calm but serious. She told me that someone from the rehearsal had sent her the video of the microphone moment, and she wanted to hear from me if that was really how Camilla planned to speak at our wedding. She asked whether the wrinkled prune line was a one-time slip or a regular part of the way Camilla talked about me. She also asked in a quieter voice if Mira had heard any of it, and what Mira had asked afterward. As she spoke, I watched my daughter climb the ladder and pause at the top, looking down at me with the sketchbook pressed to her chest. In that moment, with my mother's questions in my ear and my child's eyes on me, I understood that pretending this was only about my pride would be a lie. After that call with my mother, I spent a few nights moving on autopilot. I went to work, answered emails, and updated schedules as if nothing had changed. Inside, something had shifted. I no longer told myself this would get better on its own. I began to think about what it would mean to walk away before the wedding, instead of walking into it with my eyes shut. One morning, I parked my car in the underground garage of the office tower, turned off the engine, and sat in silence. My phone screen showed the calendar entry I had set weeks earlier. Meeting, personal, 11 a.m. I thought about turning it off and going back home. Then I remembered Mira's drawing with the question mark instead of my face and my mother's voice asking whether I wanted my daughter to think that humiliation was normal. I locked the car and went inside. The lobby felt cooler than the outside air. People moved through security gates, some hurrying, some walking slowly with folders in their hands. I checked in at the desk and sat on a bench under a plant, my hands resting on my knees. When my name was called, I followed a staff member into a small room with a table and 2 chairs. The person on the other side of the table had a neutral face and a notebook. I told them I was not sure what I wanted to do yet, that I did not hate the woman I was supposed to marry, but that I did not want my daughter to grow up believing jokes like wrinkled prune were normal parts of love. I explained about the rehearsal microphone, the viral clip, the dinner, and the questions Mira had asked. I spoke about finances too, about joint accounts that were about to open, about signatures that had not yet gone down on paper. They listened, took a few notes, and then explained simple things in simple language. They said that until I signed certain documents, I still had choices. They said that calling off a wedding was painful, but often less painful than living in a marriage built on disrespect and public mockery. They talked about ways to separate our finances cleanly, about how to make sure my daughter's living situation did not change suddenly if Camilla moved out, and about writing a short statement for the court if I wanted to explain why I was canceling plans instead of simply disappearing. They did not push me toward any option. They only told me what the law allowed and what it could not do. I asked questions, careful and slow. I repeated that whatever I decided, it had to be legal and as gentle on Mira as possible. Before I left, they gave me a small piece of paper and asked if I wanted to write myself a short reminder. I wrote just 2 words, bring forms. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. When I walked back through the lobby, my hands felt a little less empty. In the garage, I sat in the car for a moment before driving away. I opened the voice memo app on my phone and recorded a quiet summary of the meeting and of the events that had led up to it. I spoke about the rehearsal, the exact Wrinkled Prune line, the laughter, Helena's face, Vivian's retelling, Mira's drawing, and the supermarket comments. I kept my tone flat and factual. When I finished, a soft beep confirmed that the memo had saved. I transferred it to a small USB stick I kept in the glove compartment and wrote the date on a tiny label. If anyone had seen it, they would have thought it was just another storage device. At home that week, the apartment felt like a stage where one actor knew the script had changed and the other did not. Camilla was busier than ever. She planned content around honest brides, posted polls asking whether people preferred sweet speeches or brutal roast speeches, and shared behind-the-scenes clips from the rehearsal. The Wrinkled Prune line appeared more than once. In one clip, she zoomed in on my face in slow motion while the audio of her joke played in the background. The comments exploded with laughing faces and people calling her fearless. She showed me the responses and said I should be proud to be part of something so entertaining. She said not every man got to be a meme. I did not fight with her. I did not shout. When she told me I was too quiet, I said I was thinking. In the evenings, after she went out with friends to decompress, I sat at the little desk in the living room with my laptop. I opened a new folder on my desktop called Home. Inside it, I made 3 subfolders: Auto, Bank, and another simply called Archive. Inside Archive, I created 2 more, Archive A and Archive B. I moved copies of screenshots, receipts, and notes into them. Every time I saved a file, a Cloud Sync message appeared in the corner. File uploaded successfully. The words repeated until they almost felt like a heartbeat. I printed a few key items and slid them into the household binder, behind the sticky note that now read, "Bring forms," in my own handwriting. From the outside, it looked like any other stack of household papers. One night, I stood on the stairwell landing, holding a trash bag, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Camilla came up from the street wearing a short dress and a bright jacket, phone pressed to her ear. She did not see me at first. She told whoever she was speaking with that her fiancé was acting like a lawyer without a license, that he was probably building a secret file on how wrinkled she made him feel. She laughed and said that if I kept being this dramatic before the wedding, she might have to roast me at the altar just to wake me up. I heard a soft shift behind one of the doors on the landing. Ms. Dobrev's apartment always had a thin line of light under the frame when she was home. When Camilla ended her call and finally noticed me, she raised an eyebrow and asked if I had enjoyed eavesdropping. I told her I had not needed to try. Her voice carried. I said, in as steady a tone as I could manage, that I was done arguing in circles about respect and that if the mockery continued, I would handle it properly. I used that exact phrase. I did not gesture, did not move toward her. I just said the words. As I finished, my phone vibrated in my pocket. When I pulled it out, the screen showed an alarm labeled paper drop. It was a reminder I had set for myself days before and forgotten. Camilla saw the words on the screen and laughed at first, then her smile flickered for a second. She glanced toward Ms. Dobrev's door, seeing the narrow line of light below it. Then she rolled her eyes and said that I loved drama even more than she did, only my version was boring. She pushed past me and went into the apartment, letting the door close loudly behind her. I was left on the landing, holding the trash bag and the still glowing phone, thinking about how sometimes the only power a person had left was deciding where to stand. The morning I finally took her words at face value, the sky was flat and gray. Instead of going to a last planning session at the venue, I walked into the courthouse with my hands in my pockets. The building hummed with the kind of quiet that holds many stories at once. Security gates clicked and buzzed as people passed through. I checked the time on my phone. The calendar entry said Courthouse, 9:00 a.m. The message thread labeled Follow-up sat archived below it, the last note confirming that certain documents had been filed, papers to cancel our joint financial steps, a declaration explaining my decision to call off the wedding, requests to keep Mira's living situation stable. I sat on a bench near the wall, close enough to see the entrance doors. My heart beat calmly, but my hands were still. A few minutes later, Camilla walked in with Vivian at her side and a friend trailing behind. Camilla's heels clicked loudly on the floor. She spoke in a bright voice that carried through the lobby. She told her mother that she was going to make sure I could not play the victim, that she would talk to someone about stopping my supposed legal obsession before it became a problem. Vivian agreed and said that I needed to learn I could not attack their family with rules and paperwork. They did not notice me at first. They went to the information desk, their heads high, their voices tight with determination. A person in a simple uniform stepped away from a column near the center of the lobby, holding a sealed envelope. They walked over to Camilla and asked her to confirm her name. She did, with a confident tilt of her head. Then they handed her the envelope and said it was for her. She opened it right there, perhaps expecting some kind of minor notice or letter she could dismiss. As her eyes moved down the first page, the muscles in her face changed shape. Inside were the documents I had quietly prepared. A petition to cancel the joint loan applications we had started, notices about removing her from certain pending authorizations on accounts, and a short declaration explaining that I was calling off the wedding due to a pattern of public humiliation and online mockery that had already affected my mother and my daughter. The declaration mentioned the Wrinkled Prune line at the rehearsal, the posted clip, the rehearsal dinner retelling, and Mira's questions about whether anyone could love a prune father. It did not insult Camilla. It simply listed events in order, with dates and witnesses, and stated that I no longer believed standing at the altar was safe or honest for me or for Mira. Vivian leaned over Camilla's shoulder to read. As her eyes scanned the pages, her mouth opened and closed without sound. She looked around the lobby, as if searching for someone to blame other than the woman in front of her with the envelope in her hands. When her eyes found me sitting on the bench, she walked over and demanded to know how I could do this to her daughter. She said I was humiliating them in public, that I was making a simple joke into a legal drama. I stood up slowly and told her, in a calm voice that even surprised me, that I was simply refusing to tie myself and my child to someone who had chosen to build her image on hurting us. I said that Camilla had asked for attention, and that now the court would give some, but in a different way. We went outside into the small plaza to wait for the next step. A few people sat on benches nearby, smoking or checking their phones. Camilla paced in front of me, holding the petition. She asked how I could do this days before the wedding, how I could ruin everything after all the planning. She said I was cruel and ungrateful, that she had given me excitement and content, and I had given her only paperwork. I answered that I had tried to speak quietly about respect many times, and each time the answer had been more jokes and more posts. I said that I did not expect her to understand my choice now, but that I believed one day she might look at our daughter and see it differently. Vivian called me cold, said no real man would walk away instead of fighting. I told her that this was my way of fighting, not with fists or shouting, but with a simple refusal to accept a stage where I was only ever the clown. Colin had arrived by then, from another entrance. He took the papers from Camilla's hand and read them more slowly. His face changed as he moved through the pages, like someone walking through a house and finding doors he did not know existed. My parents arrived as well. Helena stood a little behind me, her coat buttoned, her hands folded. Alan stayed close, his expression unreadable but steady. They did not say much. They did not need to. Their presence told me enough. Mira was not there. She was with a neighbor back at our apartment, helping bake simple cookies, far away from the echo of these walls. We went back inside when a clerk stepped out of a corridor and called our names. The elevator doors at the end of the lobby slid open with a clear bell that cut through the murmur of other conversations. The clerk held a clipboard and asked us to follow for a brief hearing about the filings. Camilla still had the petition clutched in her hand, the pages slightly bent from her grip. She looked at me, at her parents, at the open elevator. For once, she did not have a joke ready. I took one slow breath, feeling it settle my chest. Then I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the elevator with the clerk. I did not look back to see who followed or who stayed behind. The sound of the elevator bell and the soft rustle of legal pages were the only noises I carried with me as the doors slid closed, sealing off, at last, the room where Wrinkled Prune had once been just a rehearsal line.